Hey guys, Macronats Pie here, and welcome back to another episode of Kyle is Famous. Okay, let's see. Oh, Kyle is Famous, Kyle is Hotdog DLC. Okay.
Kyle woke up.
Change jobs.
Kyle thought very carefully about the first move of his day.
So we can become the hot dog salesman again?
Kyle laid in bed for a moment, thinking about the day ahead.
The wallpaper has changed to hot dogs.
Kyle had become a hot dog vendor. He must now prepare for his first day running a hot dog stand.
Okay, open the closet. Choose an outfit.
Kyle
Choose
decided
hot dog suit.
Kyle put on his hot dog suit, which he had made by stitching hot dogs together when he was a child.
Okay, back to room. Scavenge.
Kyle quickly crouched down on the floor, realizing his immediate need for
Hot dogs.
Kyle started looking around for hot dogs. He crawled around, spreading layers of mold to the side with his hands and picking out interesting items. Kyle couldn't find any hot dogs, but instead he found a pile of love letters he had written in high school.
Terrifying.
Kyle pocketed the envelopes and got back to his feet.
Okay, exit the hallway. Leave apartment. Visit downstairs neighbor.
Kyle approached his downstairs neighbor's door and knocked. A middle-aged woman named Gabby answered the door. "Good morning, neighbor," said Kyle cheerfully. Gabby looked at Kyle expectantly. "Gabby, this is important," said Kyle. "Do you have a pen I could borrow?" "Kyle," said Gabby, "don't you have even a single pen of your own?" "No, Gabby," said Kyle, clutching her arms and looking into her eyes. "I haven't written since high school."
That explains so much.
Gabby stared at Kyle and pursed her lips. After a moment, she took a pen out of her pocket. "Kyle, I'll give you a pen, but please be careful with what you write. Harsh words are a weapon to wield carefully." Kyle mumbled agreement, took the pen, and skipped away from Gabby's house.
Okay, back to street. Return to apartment. Return to bedroom. Sit at desk. Rewrite love letters.
Kyle took out the letters from his pocket and set them on the desk. Kyle looked at the letter in front of him for a moment. Then, in a burst of inspiration, he started to write.
Write about fish.
Kyle decided Abigail probably wanted to hear about fish. After writing about fish for a couple hours, Kyle finished and got up from the desk. Kyle made his way to the street corner. After a long day of preparation, Kyle felt very ready for his first outing as a hot dog salesman. Kyle started to unpack his things onto the corner of the street. As Kyle was unpacking, his hand brushed the old love letters he had picked up earlier. He stopped. Something tugged at Kyle's heart. These letters were a piece of himself. These letters were a piece of history. Kyle realized it was time to give these letters to their original intended recipients.
Terrifying.
Kyle looked at the top letter of the stack. It was addressed to Abigail, a girl Kyle had liked during high school.
This is Gabby.
Abigail had moved to the other side of the city with her husband
Oh,
a
no,
few years
it's
ago,
worse.
but Kyle was willing to make the trip. Kyle skipped away to Abigail's house, letter in hand. It wasn't that Kyle liked Abigail anymore. It wasn't that he missed her. To Kyle, this was more important than that. After an hour of walking, Kyle finally reached Abigail's front door. With excitement in his heart, Kyle took a breath and knocked on the door. Abigail opened it.
This is no.
"Kyle," she said, smiling. "What are you doing here? It's been so long."
Not good. Bad accent.
"Abby," said Kyle, "I have something I want to read to you." Kyle took the letter to Abigail clutched in his hand, opened it, and began to read.
You've written them about fish.
"Hello, Abigail," said Kyle. "I am very obsessed with fish. Sometimes I glue fish to my face and on my feet so I can feel like I am a fish. Then I wallow on the floor. I would not mind watching you eat whole fish. I believe consuming fish is a good way to bond with each other.
Oh, God, no.
Kyle looked at Abigail briefly to emphasize his next sentence. I wish you were a fish, because I like fish much better than you.
Oof.
Abigail put her hand on Kyle's letter. Kyle, stop, she said. There's no need for that, because I am already a fish.
What?
Abigail suddenly sprouted fins from her waist. Her face turned into a gasping bass face with bugged eyes.
What?
Abigail fell to the ground and started flailing around, making wet slapping sounds against the pavement. Kyle was delighted. Kyle, Abigail, and her husband started a fast friendship. They spent evenings talking, laughing, and sharing meals. They talked about fish often. It was fulfilling and meaningful to all of them.
Oh, God.
Kyle had found a new set of friends.
He found the fish.
Kyle thought, Kyle decided to...
Okay, there's another
put on his hot
ending
dog.
where you just...
Kyle started...
Okay,
Kyle pocket...
back to the room. Exit the hallway, leave the apartment, downstairs. There's a
Kyle
second
approached his
ending where you
downstairs
point out the
neighbor's-
flaws.
A middle-aged...
Greet and start.
Good morning, neighbor.
Ask Gabby for a
Gab-
pen. You know what? At least it wasn't Gabby. Poor Gabby's been
Kyle-
through enough in
Kyle
this
mo-
series. Return to her apartment. Return to bedroom. Sit at a desk. Rewrite love letters.
Kyle looked at
Point
the
out
letter
where
in
stuff
front of
he
him
hits
for a moment.
flaws.
Then, in a burst of inspiration, he started to write. Kyle decided to make some important comments about his high school crush that had been on his mind. After being upfront and honest, Kyle had produced a letter that was definitely weapon-like in nature.
Bye-bye.
Kyle made his way to the street corner. After Kyle
Okay,
started...
unpack.
As Kyle was unpacking, his hand brushed the old love letters he had picked up earlier. Something tugged...
Okay, so it's the same dialogue as before. Okay.
With Abby. Kyle, she said, smiling. What are you doing here? It's been so long,
It goes southern really quick, and it catches me
Abby.
off guard.
said Kyle. I have something I want to read to you. Kyle looked into Abigail's eyes, smiled, and opened the letter. Hi, Abby, he read.
Oh,
I
this
do
is
not
worse than the
understand
fish.
How people can
I
appreciate
think I
you.
prefer the fish.
I pretend to have a crush on you, but it's only because I'm bored. I don't
Never.
actually like you much at all.
Oh, God. No.
It starts with the fact that you're not attractive. If you took more time on your appearance, I might like you for real.
Oh, no.
But that wouldn't solve the problem of your bland and
no.
meaningless personality. That you probably can't fix.
Oh, God.
Kyle looked up and finished. I would tell you to keep trying, but I'm not convinced it would make a difference. Abigail looked at Kyle softly. Oh, Kyle, she said. Have you been bottling that up since high school?
Why is she
She
suffering?
gave Kyle a supportive hug. I'm sure that's been on your mind, and I'm glad you got it off your chest. Kyle accepted the hug. It really has been. I've been thinking about it a lot.
Why are...
The two chatted idly for a while about high school and where their classmates were now. After about an hour, Kyle decided it was time to leave. Abigail and Kyle said their goodbyes. She told him to keep getting his feelings out so he could get past them. As Kyle walked home, he realized how incredibly abnormal it was to have such caring friends. Perhaps tomorrow he would start selling hot dogs. But tonight, he was glad to have instead spent his time with good company.
Reignited a friendship. Okay, change jobs.
Kyle...
Hot dog.
Ki-
Skip. Start day. Okay. Open our closet. Put on the
Kyle-
hot dog suit.
Kyle put on his hot dog suit, which he had made by stitching hot dogs together when he was a child.
And then there is another ending where we just don't do
Kyle
anything
quickly
to the
crouched down.
letters. Okay, so you found the
Kyle.
letters. And then we skip to the end of the day.
Kyle made his way to the street corner. After a long day of preparation, Kyle felt very ready for his first outing as a hot dog salesman. Kyle started to unpack his things onto the corner of the street. As Kyle was unpacking, his hand brushed the old love letters he had picked up earlier. He stopped. Something tugged at Kyle's heart. These letters were a piece of himself. These letters were a piece of history. Kyle realized it was time to give these letters to their original intended recipients. Kyle looked at the top letter of the stack. It was addressed to Abigail, a girl Kyle had liked during high school. Abigail had moved to the other side of the city with her husband a few years ago, but Kyle was willing to make the trip. Kyle skipped away to Abigail's house, letter in hand. It wasn't that Kyle liked Abigail anymore. It wasn't that he missed her. To Kyle, this was more important than that. After an hour of walking, Kyle finally reached Abigail's front door. With excitement in his heart, Kyle took a breath and knocked on the door.
A lot.
Abigail opened it. "Kyle," she said, smiling. "What are you doing here? It's been so long."
I hate every second of it.
"Abby," said Kyle, "I have something I want to read to you." Kyle took the letter to Abigail clutched in his hands and opened it for the first time in 14 years. "Dear Abby," he read, "I feel funny when I look at you.
Oh, no.
Sometimes I think about you when I lie awake at night, but also sometimes not, but that's less often. I also talk about you constantly to everyone when you're not around, but it's not always good things.
Oh, no.
Sometimes I also steal your lunches when you're not looking and keep them in a drawer at my house to look at when I'm bored.
Creepy.
I want you to promise me something." Kyle looked at Abby meaningfully. "Promise you like me.
Oh, no.
And if you do like me, please show me by shoving live fish down your throat as a sign of dedication." Abigail shut the door. Kyle looked up from the letter and stopped reading. He looked at the door in front of him. He realized that Abigail probably had something to do, so he decided to leave her the letters to read later.
That's terrifying.
Kyle pressed the letters against the door and pushed firmly. He took a nearby rock and drove it through the papers into the door so Abigail could not miss them.
Honey.
With evening dawning, Kyle went home, satisfied that he had finished an old chapter of his life. When Kyle got home, he realized that he loved writing letters to Abigail.
Oh, no.
He decided that he would continue to do so every day and make her his pen pal.
I think that might be harassment.
Kyle fell asleep with a smile. It had been a good day.
Not for Abby. Okay.
Kyle thought...
Exit. Check lock door.
Kyle walked over to the strange door in the hallway.
Use Hotdog magic.
With a hum and a pop, Kyle used his massive knowledge of hot dog magic to change the door handle into a hot dog. Kyle sucked the hot dog into his mouth, opened the door, and walked through.
I hate that his voice changes when he said that.
This was one of the many mysterious artifacts Kyle had been sent over the years. Kyle stashed the mysterious artifact for later use.
Okay, back to the hallway. Move to the kitchen. Think about hot dogs.
Being in the kitchen gave Kyle a massive amount of hot dog-related nostalgia. He stood still, pondering. Kyle continued to think about hot dogs. Kyle still continued to think about hot dogs. He thought about their flavor. He thought about how different brands tasted different.
True.
Kyle thought about hot dog texture and their feeling in his hand. Kyle was still thinking about hot dogs. Kyle's skin began to dissolve its bonds and melt from standing still too long. He began to spread across the floor, creating small puddles through the kitchen. Kyle's jaw caved, causing the top of his head to slowly drop backwards and point towards the ceiling. Kyle sunk lower and lower. His height was soon half of what it was before. Chunks of skin fell to the ground. Kyle's fingers and legs fell off, dissolving into drops of ooze as they dropped. Kyle was a large puddle of melted skin with bumps where his main features used to be. Kyle's atoms had lost all of their bonds. He had turned into nothing more than a meat-based soup.
Harness the artifact.
The artifact, bobbing on top of the soup of Kyle, began to glow and shudder. Kyle's loose DNA had changed the artifact's power. It began to whine and lift into the air. Then, with a large bang and several flashes of light, the artifact blew into countless projectile pieces. Kyle was no longer soupy. He had been changed into a large bipedal hot dog.
That also seems like a really good picture for the thumbnail. I hate myself.
Kyle lived life running from grocery store clerks and hungry puppies. But his career as a talk show host flourished.
How?
Viewers from all countries tuned in every week to see the strange antics of the sentient hot dog. Since Kyle had lost his ability to speak, most of his shows consisted of waving his arms up and down very meaningfully. Kyle remained famous, but also, now, Kyle was Hot Dog.
Okay. LA. Change jobs. Hot dog salesman. Skip. Start there.
Kyle walked over.
Hot dog magic. I'm not gonna. Nope. Get laser Claymore. Back to room. Back to hallway. Leave apartment. Visit marketing agency. Rummage through the trash.
Kyle began rummaging around in the trash can, looking for anything interesting. After picking through wrappers and cups, Kyle noticed there was a red button stuck to the bottom of the can.
It's gum.
Kyle eagerly pressed the button. The wall above the trash can started shifting and spinning, eventually revealing a slab of pewter with an indent.
Terrifying.
The slab was thick and old. A plaque was embedded in the top, reading, "The slab embraces only a true weapon." Kyle inserted the laser claymore into the indent. The claymore fit perfectly, snapping into place. Small metal hooks came out of all sides of the slab to hold it in place. With a pop, fizz, and a magical elf chuckle, a human-sized rainbow gateway to another dimension appeared.
Oh no.
The portal started sucking everything near it inwards, devouring chairs, trash cans, and Kyle himself. Kyle became part of a dizzying swirl. Lights and colors flashed all around him. He spun in circles rapidly. And in a moment, Kyle fell into the Gummy Bear and Claymore land, where all matter is either gummy bears or claymores.
That's terrifying. Swords
Kyle
or
was
gummy bears?
approached by a group of roaming gummy wasteland elves. Because of the harsh environment they lived in, the elves used their kin as blunt weapons to fend off its hackers. Kyle looked upon the elves and realized they must live in a depressed and war-torn culture.
Please don't bring them back.
And then, in a moment of pure empathy, Kyle decided to help the elves. Kyle grabbed the two nearest elves, one in each hand, and started to give them a talking to about war and its troubles. "Hello, you two," said Kyle. "I wish to give you a bit of advice."
Me, please.
But before Kyle could say anything more, the ground started shifting and morphed into a gummy bear monster. Kyle chucked the elves he was holding at the monster to fend it off, but it was to no avail. The monster charged at Kyle, throwing elves to the sides as it sped forward. Kyle had no choice but to become a gummy bear monster himself. He started to cover himself in gummy bears and claymores. They stuck to his skin like meaningful, gooey hugs.
Mm.
After moments of a vicious, sticky flurry, Kyle was covered in the new world's material. Then, something wonderful happened. Using a combination of determination, elf magic, and method acting, Kyle truly transformed into a real gummy monster. But in his new form, Kyle was now not interested in fighting the other gummy monster. Kyle began swallowing every elf in sight in a wild, crazy rampage. Over the next several hours, Kyle rampaged around the whole gummy world, eating every last elf whole. Kyle had gifted the elves with a warm, nutritious new world to live in.
Terrifying.
Over time, the elves created a new society inside Kyle's stomach. There was no need for war. They feasted on Kyle's stomach juices. Their culture entered a golden age.
That's some weird soup, man.
Eventually, Kyle turned back into a normal person and returned home. But the elves continued to live inside him. Kyle had saved a culture.
Unlock Kyle as Santa. That's even more terrifying. Kyle as Santa Claus is a terrifying thought. Okay, let's do one more.
Kyle thought.
Hot dog.
Kyle laid in bed for a moment.
Skip.
Kyle.
Start day. Scavenge.
Kyle quit.
For hot dogs.
Kyle pocketed the envelopes and got back to his feet.
Back to room, exit the hallway, leave apartment, visit downstairs neighbor.
A middle-aged.
Ask Gabby
Good morning, neighbor, said Kyle cheerfully. Gab.
And then we return to apartment.
Kyle mumbled agreement.
Okay, back straight, then return to apartment. Let's see. Return to bedroom, sit at desk. Rewrite love letters.
Kyle took out the letters from his pocket and set them on. Kyle looked at the.
Okay, point out recipient's flaws. Back to bedroom. Exit. Leave. Marketing agency. Rummage.
Kyle began rummaging around in the trash can, looking for anything interesting. After picking through wrappers and cups, Kyle noticed there was a red button stuck to the bottom of the can. Kyle eagerly pressed the button. The wall above the trash can started shifting and spinning, eventually revealing a slab of pewter with an indent. The slab was thick and old. A plaque was embedded in the top, reading, "The slab embraces only a true weapon." Kyle took the rewritten letter in his hand and pressed it into the indent.
Yeah, I think I burnt my mouth earlier. My mouth feels funny.
It fit perfectly, as if it had been written for this very purpose. As Kyle continued to watch, the letter began to glow softly. It sank deeper and deeper into the slab. Kyle was fixated on the letter. He watched it slowly start to turn. Then, it began to glow.
So did the background.
In a flash of light, Kyle was in his old high school, watching himself interact with his schoolmates. He watched himself walk from class to class. He saw himself eat a napkin to try to impress Abigail.
How did this man become famous when he was a grown-up?
He then saw himself eat several textbooks to try to impress Abigail. He saw himself get kicked out of the library.
Good.
Kyle watched himself write letter after letter to his crushes, friends, and even just people that see him down. They weren't mean letters, or even strange. Kyle had written them to be cheery and uplifting. Each one ended crumpled in his pocket, never delivered. Kyle remembered the compassion he had for the people around him, but he saw his inability to express it well. Kyle saw the decisions he made about his career. He watched himself consider going into hot dog sales. Kyle watched himself choose to forego his passion and choose a career in entertainment instead. His career quickly grew. He became known, popular, famous. Kyle didn't change. Kyle continued to be himself. The audience saw his strange genuinity. Kyle continued to run his talk show night after night. Viewers tuned in to laugh at his antics and strange personality. Slowly, Kyle's story came to present day. Kyle was staring at the wall of the marketing agency, clutching a letter. With a start, Kyle became aware of himself. Kyle walked out of the agency and into the approaching evening. The sky was deep orange. Wisps of clouds streaked left and right in graceful patterns. The sun was setting. Kyle wouldn't be selling hot dogs tonight, or the next night, or ever. Kyle traveled to his studio. There he met Rachel. They filmed an episode of his show together. The audience loved it. At the end of the night, Kyle walked outside and directed himself towards his apartment. As he traveled, his hand brushed the crumpled letters in his pocket. Kyle squeezed them in his palm. They would never leave his ownership. There was no need. Kyle had found his own way to deliver them.
Hot dog cursor. Okay, it was oddly sweet, and I don't like that. This game is weird. It doesn't need to be oddly sweet. Stop it. Okay. Let's see. So there is still, let's see, 1, 2, 5, 9 more endings. Okay. Let me see. The unlocks. Hotdog cursor. That's goofy, alright? Look at that. Look at that thing spin. I still haven't unlocked any trails. Okay, I'll end this episode here. If you guys like it, hit that like button. Want to see more of my content, hit the subscribe button to be notified whenever I upload. Hit that notification bell. In the description, links my Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, merch stores, all that fun jazz. The game store page and the game does link as well. And I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.